Recently, a friend of mine told me the single word that everybody likes the most. I don't know if you've ever know this. I didn't know this till my friend told me. There's one word that everyone likes more than any other word. It's totally common. It's universal. You know what that word is? It's their name. Their name. Which reminds me, I'm Ed Martin, the president of the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. It's great to be with you in this extraordinary gathering, this virtual gathering on issues, on politics, on policy, these 20 days as we look towards the election here in America. It's just so important. And you know that joke about one word that people care about is their name. Well, words have a lot of meaning, right? Words have a huge impact on what we feel, what we know, and what we do. And I want to spend some time talking to you about what I see as the real challenges in these last days before the election and the importance of what is happening and what some of the words are, what some of the issues are, what some of what we know. And I start this by reflecting on what I really think are the three most powerful words in certainly political history. I guess not in world history. There's one word, the word that was made flesh and dwelt among us, that's bigger than any other word. But for those of us in politics and policy and history, you look at three words that transformed the world. They really did. Those three words are we the people. We the people those three words are at the center of the most dramatic shift in how people live together that's ever happened in American history and world history, I would argue. But the American founding, when the founders used the phrase we the people, they changed the way we all would understand our relationship to each other and to our nation and to the government. And then they put in law through the Constitution and the rule of law, the understanding of what we the people meant. It's just been extraordinary. And frankly, that's what's at stake in this election. And you know, I'm wearing a purple tie because a lot of times when I go on shows and go and talk to people, I talk about the purple states. One of the commentators once called me the Purple Martin. And so I'm talking about the purple states that have been in the past one party and have voted another way, that they look purple. They were blue and now they're voting red. And in the upcoming election, one of the things I want to talk to you about is the importance of those parts of our country where people are changing their votes, changing their view in terms of how they relate to the parties because A, it will have an effect on the election, and B, it says something about our core values. And so back to we the people. When our founders said we the people, when they changed the way we thought about it, they did two things. One, they recognized that God is the one that gives us our sovereignty. Each of us is a created being and created in the image and likeness of God. And that creation gives each of us certain inalienable rights. It gives us certain dignity. It gives us lots of meaning. And that was the starting point for what the founders wanted in this new nation. By the way, that's spread around the world, that understanding. It's one of the most important political understandings that's ever happened. The second part of that, though, was that we, the people, who had our own sovereignty, we didn't have to wait for the government to give it to us. We didn't have to wait for the king to say we could do this or the queen to say we were worth that. We didn't have to invent something and only get the value of that because someone in power, a government, a bureaucrat, some agency gave us that value. We had in us the sovereignty and we shared it together through our states, very important, to the federal government. That shift of we the people has been profound. And that's, with the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, our many organizations and the work we do across the country, thousands and thousands of volunteers. What Phyllis Schlafly, the late Phyllis Schlafly taught us, she taught us, by the way, about the value of words. She was an incredible writer and speaker, and she was very concise. But she also taught us that out in the community, the value of every human being, of every American citizen, and how we can get the policies that will allow us to continue America's greatness. So in my time to talk to you today, I want to talk about some of the politics that's happening and some of the policy. I'd like to make 5 points or talk about 5 areas of our focus. And the first one I want to talk about is American exceptionalism, which I started to talk about there. The second one I want to talk about is promises kept, about the President Trump, promises made, promises kept. The third area I want to talk about is drain the swamp. The area maybe that's more threatening than anything to we the people is what the swamp is doing. The fourth one is a very specific comment on how people hate to be diminished and demeaned. People feel it in their very core when they are diminished, and how what's on the ballot this fall relates to that. And finally, I want to talk about the choice. The choice is ours. The choice is ours. But in American political life and American governing, we have to make a choice between two parties, two candidates, two visions for our future. So first, let's talk about American exceptionalism. And I want to put this in the context of our history. If you know our history, the American history, that I just referred to, our founding, you know that it's a Judeo-Christian nation. We were founded on a set of values that certainly respected other faiths, but drew its strength from the ethic of the Judeo-Christian tradition, which meant that it was a faith in people as created, in a God as sovereign, and in a certain set of values between people. When you say in America, we have this unbelievable market system, the capitalist market system. Why does it work? Well, it works for lots of reasons. The Constitution, the rule of law, but it also works because the people, I think it was Ben Franklin that said our government requires a moral people. The people are moral people, and they're informed by the honor of making a deal and giving their word and being bound by their word, and they understand that. And so that was at the very beginning. American exceptionalism from the very beginning had a sense of honor and value through our Judeo-Christian roots. But very importantly, early on, two developments took hold. One was the notion of property rights, that you had the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the pursuit of happiness meant that you had the right to go and get what you wanted. And then when you got it, no one could take it from you, not easily at least. You couldn't have your property seized by the government without, at least at the beginning, without having a proper procedure. If there was some reason to do it, it shouldn't have happened much at all. You couldn't have taxes levied against you without real serious reasons. Now, we've seen an encroachment on all those in our government, but American exceptionalism meant that you had the right to your property, that you had the right to your value, that you had the right to yourself and what you did and your family. It couldn't be taken from you. In our Constitution, there's only one place in the actual Constitution where the word right exists. The word right, it ends up in the Bill of Rights too, of course. But in the original Constitution, it's the right of inventors and writers and creators, to the right to own and have their property. Not wait for the king to grant them a patent, not wait for the sovereign to give them their right. They had it themselves. And that protection, property rights, created this extraordinary America where we invent things and we create value, and we have, as the late Phyllis Schlafly gave a famous speech at the Daughters of the American Revolution in the 80s about all these inventions. We invented the airplane, we invented the telephone, we invented the light bulb. America did all this stuff. Are Americans smarter than everyone else in the world? Well, maybe, but more likely the system we live in values invention. And all the way down through today, American exceptionalism is about these incredible property rights. A second aspect of American exceptionalism is freedom. In this pandemic that we've seen in the last 6 months, we've seen government try to tell us that they'll pick for us what they see as health, what they see as well-being over our freedom. That's not American. The American system in our core, at our beginning, was we the people are a free people. We the people, our American exceptionalism is that we get to decide the value of freedom versus health in this case. And there's lots of examples now where you see, especially state governments, getting totalitarian on telling us, we'll tell you, we'll take your freedoms. That's not American. From the beginning, the protections in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the rule of law of American exceptionalism were that we had our freedoms and they couldn't be diminished by government or anybody else. We'd fight wars when we saw threats to our freedom. We'd fight wars against foreign adversaries on their lands to make sure that freedom didn't encroach. I'm thinking of World War II and World War I. So American exceptionalism at its heart was tied to this notion of freedom and our ability to decide, tied to this notion of property rights, our ability to create. And that's at stake in this election. The vision of the other side, the vision of the Democrats in this election, is a vision, they often call it socialism. That's what Bernie Sanders did. That's what all the candidates running for office. But it really is a vision of taking our freedom, taking our property rights, and diminishing them. If you have a managed economy, if you have an economy that is a nation that is held down by China, which is what the Democrats under Obama did and what Biden seems to be signaling, if you have a nation that is dominated by its government and its foreign adversaries, you don't have a free nation. That's what's at stake, American exceptionalism. And one more point on this. When the left wants to revise history, they don't mean to acknowledge any singular failing. We can always look back and see that so-and-so wasn't quite as good a person or wasn't quite as successful at this. No, that's not what they want to do. They want to eliminate our history. They want to take away from us the memory of what made us exceptional. And if you forget how we got here, you might forget how to keep going. If you forget why the Constitution was developed and how it happened, you might think, well, let's just get rid of the Electoral College or get rid of the separation of powers or get rid of the balance of our constitutional government. American exceptionalism is on the ballot, and at the heart of it is this notion of law and order and this notion of fairness, because the system is supposed to apply to all of us equally, not to one group above another. And when rioters burn city streets, and then they turn around and say it was a protest. And when people go to church and they're told they can't do that because it's an improper assembly, you're looking at it and you're saying law and order is out of whack. That's what's on the ballot. So that's American exceptionalism. That's the first one. Promises kept. I want to keep moving because I want to not take too much time. Promises kept. Look, when you look at elections in these last 20 days, we're looking at this election saying, what are the choices? You have to look at the incumbent, right? I wrote a book about this. It's right here. It's called Promises Made, Promises Kept. The top 100 Trump promises made, promises kept. Look at what someone says when they run and what they do in office. Everything from the president getting into office and moving the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem within weeks, a month, getting prisoners out. We saw recently a few more prisoners released from Yemen, American prisoners. The president ran on specific promises: appoint good judges, support the Second Amendment, eliminate regulations. He's gone through, and we need, in these last days, to be educated to say not what the bluster of the media is, but what the facts are on promises made, promises kept. We just saw the confirmation process of Amy Coney Barrett begin. It's right in the middle of it now. She will be confirmed right before the election. She's a very specific promise made and promise kept. President Trump said he would pick his nominees to the Supreme Court from a list that he produced 4 years ago. She was on the list then. She was picked from the list. Same with Kavanaugh and Gorsuch. On March 11th, 2016, Phyllis Schlafly and I and Donald Trump, he was running for president then, met in a little room at the Peabody Opera House in St. Louis. And Phyllis Schlafly asked him, will you live up to the conservative platform, that's this document, and will you appoint good judges? And the conversation was more than that. But Donald Trump said, I will. And if you go through systematically, you'll see a guy who made promises and kept promises, getting us back from the wars, building up our military so it's stronger, honoring our veterans, all these examples. Does it mean he's achieved everything? No, he couldn't achieve everything because he's had to battle the swamp. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it does mean that you have a certain quality of the promises made and going forward, the promises that have been kept. In other words, you've earned some trust from voters if they can say, oh, you said you do this and then you did that. You said you do the X and you did X. You tried to do Y. One example is building the wall. Someone came up to me and said, he didn't build the whole wall. I said, well, he's building the wall. He's changing our immigration system. Our immigration system under the Democrats and Republicans in the last 10 years before Trump was a system that allowed free access to America, immigration on demand, illegal immigration, increase of legal immigration that took American jobs. And President Trump has changed all that directionally. Still needs more work to do. There's a lot to be done. But every time he's had to fight in the courts or he's had to fight his own Congress, he's had to keep that fight up and people see it. So that's a promise. That's a promise kept. That's a promise kept. But my point here is in politics, in policy, in campaigns, and in places like Pennsylvania, a swing state, he said, I'll get fracking. We'll be energy independent. America will be energy independent because we'll use our resources. He allowed fracking, he cut regulations, and bam, for the first time in forever, we are energy independent and the jobs that are created. Those are the kinds of answers to the question of did you keep your promises that make a huge difference. Which brings me to number 3. on these five, the big five that I gave you. And this may be the most important political of these five, and that is drain the swamp. In October of 2016, as the campaign headed to the final days, President Trump used drain the swamp in a rally for the first time. Later, he was interviewed, and he said, "I was surprised by the reaction." And he said, "I used it the next night." And he said the reaction was huge, and he used it the rest of the way. I talked to a longtime political consultant just about 3 months ago, and I asked him about that phrase. I said, "It's still so powerful. The American people are so sick of the swamp." And my friend, political consultant, said, in one of the states where a U.S. senator was running, a Republican, in 2016, every time Trump used drain the swamp, that candidate lost a point in the polls. And the reason why is because the American people are sick of all the incumbents. Too many of the incumbents of both parties have used their power to advantage themselves, their families, and to take advantage of we the people. If you've seen the movie Hunger Games, that's based on the book, famous book, and the movie Hunger Games, they talk, and there's an image at one point where the people out in the districts, they call it, are some of them are going to the Capitol, and as they get closer, they see the glowing wealth of the Capitol, all the shiny wealth, all the cars or vehicles or whatever, food, everything, and the regular people are stuck with less. That's how we feel. That's how the American feel. Trust me, American people feel. Trust me, in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania and New Hampshire, in all these swing states where this race will be contested, people are looking up and they're saying, the swamp seems to be giving one set of rules to the powerful and the rest of us pay the price. And there's no better example than what happened to General Mike Flynn. General Flynn was attacked by the Obama administration, the Clinton campaign, and the deep state. He was eliminated from government service. He wasn't eliminated because he was not a good guy or not smart. He was eliminated because he was the most valuable member of the Trump campaign and then transition. And he was eliminated on trumped-up charges, and then the entire deep state went into a protection racket where they went through millions of dollars and obfuscation and all kinds of things. And by the way, both parties were part of it. Everybody's got a way to look at this so you can say, how did that happen? But at the end of the day, the swamp tried to destroy a decorated war hero to the detriment of we the people. The media revealed themselves to be a part of it. It's a disaster for our country. It's a disaster. Here's where you have to take this now. If you look at Joe Biden and his record after 47 years in office, he's suddenly, by the way, a multimillionaire. He's been out of office for about a year, and he's a multimillionaire, and his family has gained lots of money and power and influence. But Joe Biden, 47 years, what has he accomplished? What has he done for the American people? What has he done for Delaware? What has he done? And the answer is not much, but mostly it is build the swamp up. And now we have the story of his son, Hunter Biden, who is literally dealing with foreign powers, getting paid by foreign powers, while his father's vice president, setting up meetings, it looks like, or allowing meetings or encouraging meetings. I think we'll find out in these last weeks. But the president of the United States has fought the swamp, and Joe Biden has been of the swamp. And going forward in these last days of this election, we have to be clear to the voters, there's a choice. Donald Trump didn't need the presidency to be wealthy. He didn't need the presidency to be powerful. He didn't need the presidency to be famous. And Joe Biden is Joe Biden. There we have it. And so maybe the most important contrast is drain the swamp. And we, as we talk about the importance of these issues, need to use it more and more, use that phrase more and more to draw the contrast. Okay, I want to get into something that's very specific and targeted, this fourth point about people hate to be diminished. Voters hate to be demeaned. It's very important, and this is existential for the future of America. This is at our very core. At our very core, when we founded, there were lots of different people. In America, the Virginians were as different from the Massachusetts as you could be. They had different sensibilities, they had different styles. Everyone was different in that founding. And they banded together, not as a hyphenated American, but as Americans. They put together a system that said we're all Americans. We're Americans first. Sounds familiar, right? Americans first. We put America first. We don't put Massachusetts first. We don't put Virginia first. We put America first. That's what the founders did. And all the way down through history till today, We had this sensibility that we're America, one nation. You might come from Ireland, you might come from the Philippines, you might be here before any of the founding, you might come last month. But when you did, you became American. And you might have a hyphenated history. You might be Italian American, I don't know, whatever it is, but you were American. In the last decade, and especially in the last months in this election, we've seen the demeaning of the American people by being made into hyphenated Americans. Can you imagine a presidential candidate announces that he will only talk to and only interview white Americans to be vice president? Can you imagine that happening? Of course not. It would be demeaning, diminishing, hateful. Can you imagine a presidential candidate announcing he will only pick a man to be a vice president? Of course not. It's demeaning. It's despicable. Can you imagine a presidential candidate saying those things, except that's what Joe Biden did? He said he would only pick a woman as vice president. He'll only pick a woman who's African American as the Supreme Court pick if he wins. This is demeaning of people, and in a way that has this terrible dividing effect on us, on the American people. And more, if you look back on President Trump's administration, you look at his policies and what he says, he loves to talk about certain successes. African-American unemployment is a record low, Hispanic unemployment at a record low. But what he puts above all else is if you're American, you're on his team and he'll fight for you. He's the captain of Team America. And I'm just telling you, if you look inside the data at the election that's coming, more and more of the groups that have been pandered to with the hyphenated Americans by the left are rejecting that. More and more of the people inside, the groups and their group leaders, the racist Black Lives Matter group, they may reject it and say, oh no, this or that. But inside the communities in this country, people are looking and they're saying, I want to be a part of a team that looks out for me. President Trump has been talking about school choice. And the people that hate school choice the most are the teachers' unions in this country. The teachers' unions that during the pandemic, they said, if we're going to go back to work, we need to have Medicare for all. We need to have Black Lives Matter values assessed. This is what the teachers' union said. Most parents said, I need my kids to get back to school to try to be educated. And Donald Trump said, let's have school choice. Why? The disproportionate number of people affected by schools and schools failures are, guess what? Low income. And they tend to be African American and Hispanic American and others. But the hyphenated American division has been shattered now by the Trump administration's efforts to address the policies that people care about. And so what we're seeing, there was a poll out recently that Orthodox Jews, they did a poll, I didn't even know how to poll these things. They polled, one of the religious Jewish magazines polled Orthodox Jews. And they said, who are you going to vote for? And they were, I think it's 86% for Trump, and 11% for Biden, and whatever else was undecided. That was a 29-point swing from Hillary Clinton. Same thing's happening with African American men. Same thing's happening with LGBT Americans who see a president who says, let's make policies that are positive for we the people, for all Americans, help everybody. Let's not pick and choose winners and losers. And at the heart of it, what the left is doing when they pick winners and losers is they're demeaning. The hyphen is a minus sign, and the minus takes away from we the people. It takes away from individuals. It makes them less than a part of our team and our effort. It's terrible, it's demeaning, and it's hateful. And that's what the riots are about. That's what the far left wants to do. They want to diminish us and demean us, in large part because they don't believe in God and they hate America. But also, it doesn't matter why, we just have to recognize it. All right, the last comment, the last of these I want to say is, understand what moment we're in, where we are in America. The late Phyllis Schlafly, and she wrote this famous book, of course, it's called A Choice, Not an Echo, about the kingmakers and people that try to tell us who we should pick. They eliminate for us the choices that we have, and we get stuck picking echoes of the past. We get stuck picking the same old, same old. People that run for office and say, I'll stand up to China, then they get in office and they don't, both parties. Donald Trump ran against China, said we're going to stop them if they won't play fair. When they wouldn't play fair, we had a trade war. And you know who's winning the trade war? America. Another promise made, promise kept, by the way. The Chinese recently admitted they're losing, I think, $55 billion a year in the trade war. Americans were only losing $15 billion. So we're winning the trade war. But when you have a choice, it's a time for choosing. And here's what I want to tell you. You have to remind your friends, there's no fictitious sort of apocryphal pick out there to be president. You don't get to vote for Martin Sheen on the television when he's acting as president. You have to pick between the two choices, and the two choices couldn't be clearer. They couldn't be clearer in terms of what the values are and what the direction they want for our country. The late Phyllis Schlafly used to say, if you want a third party, fourth party, fifth party, you got to go to Europe. That's not the American system. In the American system, the two parties generate candidates. You can look at their platforms. You can see that in one platform, you've got Bernie Sanders, the Green New Deal, the far left. In the other platform, you have pro-life, America first, the Constitution. You can look at the specifics. Ultimately, you have to pick between two people, two candidates, in this case, two men. And the two men that you pick, you see them right there. Now, some have argued, and I think it's worth a discussion, when you look at the number 2 for Joe Biden, you're really looking at who they want to be president. I'll just do a quick digression. In the Democrat primary, there were 2 candidates that received the most endorsements from the so-called Democrat superdelegates that play an outsized role in the nomination process. The top 2 were Joe Biden, and the second was Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is the choice of the powerful in the Democrat Party and the left to take over. And I have to tell you, the good news for us in this country is more and more that she's known, the less and less she's liked. In the states I'm talking about, the swing states in this country, she's not popular. She's far too to the left and just not likable as a personality. But back to my last to finish this. We have a choice. We have a choice. America has a choice. The direction of the country is impacted by the choices that we make when we pick a candidate to be our president. And when you look closely and you go back and you examine it, and in these days as we go through this program, you're going to have all these different speakers on policy issues, on what's happening. Please find the ways to understand what's at stake. Find the ways to talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends about what this means. You can't just tell people, I think Trump is great, vote for him. You have to go where they are and find a way to persuade them. That's what's at stake. That's the choice we have. When you look back on our history, there are moments where things seem to be stacked up against America. George Washington spent most of 1776 losing battles. He only really saved the nation on Christmas Day in 1776. It's a phenomenal story. Abraham Lincoln was fearful of the future of the country because at various times we were on the edge of losing it. Well, we're at a moment now where many of us look up and we see big tech and social media against us as conservatives. We see the mainstream media against us as conservatives. We say to ourselves, in 2016, I don't remember those players doing so much damage to us. We see the deep state rising every day, it seems, and trying to damage the president and conservatives. We see all these things against us. And it may feel pretty daunting. I mean, the letters from George Washington out to his wife and to others in early December 1776 were pretty depressed. He felt like everything was up against the wall there. But here's what we know. Every time the American people needed to step up, needed to make it happen, we did it. And we did it in the quintessential American way. It always started with prayer, always started with remembering our Judeo-Christian roots, always started with remembering our glorious history, but then it moved quickly into, what can I do? We don't need an army of millions. We need the army of 100, as Wesley said. And we need to find our way to those groups and get ourselves and educate. So whatever you're doing in these last days, do more and redouble your effort. And know that all of us that care about these issues, care about this country, are doing a lot of the work too, and we look forward to it. So on behalf of the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, all the Eagles across the country that are working on all these issues, it's great to be with you. And if we can help you in any way, I'm Ed Martin. You can email me, ed@phyllisschlafly.com. Happy to help in any way. God bless you, and thanks for being a part of this great program. And look forward to seeing you after November 3rd with glorious victories up and down the ballot.